And welcome to our June 30th Douglas County Board of County Commissioners business meeting. We want to welcome those of you who are with us here in the Douglas County Courthouse, as well as those of you joining us online. I just want to pass on a bit of information regarding how we'll run our meetings in Zoom and in person. All participants will be entered into the meeting with their audio muted, meaning the commission and the public will not be able to hear you. Presenters will be unmuted when their agenda item comes up. We ask that all online presenters use good conference call etiquette and mute their line when not speaking and introduce themselves each time they speak. If you have a public comment on an agenda item or under regular public comment, please use raise your hand function on Zoom. Staff will call on you and unmute you. We ask that speakers give their name and address for the minutes, whether in person or online, and the county reserves the right to shut off the microphone and remove any speaker from the meeting if they are vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. A recording of this meeting will be available on our website after the meeting. So let's go ahead and get started with our consent agenda. Would either of the other commissioners like to pull anything from our consent agenda?
Nope. This Commissioner Reed, I'll make a motion to approve today's consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 I'm sorry, I forgot to ask the public if they'd like to pull anything from the consent agenda. We will move to general public comment. Do we have anyone online for general public comment? And we will move to our regular agenda. Item 3.1 from the Planning Department, consider rezoning Z21-00097, 25 acres at 981 East 1549 Road from AG1 and AG2 to CP. Sarah, do we have a presentation on this item?
Yes, Commissioners. Mary Miller from Lawrence Douglas County Planning is moving into the panel, and she will have a presentation for us.
Good evening, Commissioners. Mary Miller, City County Planner. And as you mentioned, this is a rezoning for two properties. I'll get my for two properties. These properties are zoned Ag 1 and Ag 2, and the request is to rezone them to the CP or Cluster Preservation District. The properties are located at the very southern portion of the Lawrence urban growth area. The urban growth area boundary is shown here in blue, and the subject property is shown in black. And before I move forward, I'll just give you a very brief summary of the background. This is a very unusual property. In 1993, private roads were discontinued in Douglas County, but through an error, for some reason, certain properties had been approved to have private roads after that date. And so based on the information and the minutes and the information I found, the County Commission arrived at an agreement with the property owners to allow them to continue with their development the way it had been approved on a private road, subject to certain conditions. So one condition was that the property be platted and that the plat include a tract to contain the private road. And that way this tract could be converted to right-of-way easily if it ever gets platted again or further subdivided. And the Untitled subdivision plat, which is the plat for the four lots in this subdivision, noted that any replat of the property would require the dedication of right-of-way to allow direct access to a public road. And so if the rezoning is approved, the property owners would plat their properties and would dedicate the right-of-way adjacent to them, and then they would dedicate the right-of-way on the two lots to the north through separate instrument. Had the property been rezoned A1 at that time, it would automatically have converted to the CP or Cluster Preservation District with our new zoning regulations in 2020. However, the County Commission did not require the rezoning, and it was not rezoned at that time. Therefore, rezoning is necessary now before any further subdivision can occur. The area in yellow is the area within the Untitled subdivision, and this rezoning request is for lots 3 and 4. Lot 3 is 5 acres and is developed to the residents, and lot 4 is a 20-acre lot that's undeveloped but has been used for grazing recently. The applicant provided a selection of concept plans. These were provided after the staff report had been published for the Planning Commission. Concept plans are required so that with rezoning request, we can evaluate, is it possible to divide land the way it would be allowed in that new zoning district? So with the CP district, the maximum density possible is 20 on 20 acres is 4 residential or rural development parcels. In their concept plans, they're showing 3, and then in one, they're showing 2, and they're providing the 40% future development area, which is required for plats, as well as certificates of survey in the urban growth area. And on the right side, you'll see just in the hatching, that's the tract that would be the future right-of-way. From this, it's obvious that it would be possible to subdivide, per the standards in the CP district. They may not be able to get the maximum number of lots permitted, but they could develop to that density. When we look at rezonings, we look with the review criteria and the zoning regulations, which include the golden factors. One of the golden factors is the zoning compatible with the zoning and land uses in the area? The figure on the left shows the rezonings or the zonings in the area. The center portion is zoned ag with ag 1 and ag 2. These 2 zoning designations were developed in 2020 based on the size of the parcels. And then there is CP zoning to the left and to the right. The CP zoning to the west was for a certificate of survey that was approved after 2006. It was approved within probably the last 5 years. And the CP zoning to the east is a plat that was platted prior to 2006, but the property was zoned A1. And so therefore its zoning converted to CP. The uses on the right show the land uses per the Douglas County Appraiser's Office. Some of the land they show as agricultural might be considered more just open space or woodland, but they do show the primary use as agriculture with quite a bit of residential, single family residential uses in the area. Some of the areas shown in gray are just land that hasn't been developed or that has been placed into that future development area and cannot be developed until it is annexed. So the proposed rezoning and the proposed residential uses are compatible with and similar to the zoning and land uses in the area. We look at the character of the area, and normally we look at about a 1 mile radius from the subject property. So this extends southward. This is the boundary of the urban growth area. So the area contains land outside the urban growth area, and then to the north and with the subject property land that's in the urban growth area. The areas that are transparent, highlighted transparently, are properties that were platted and rezoned prior to 2006. And the more solid colored areas are properties that were divided through certificates of survey after 2006. The properties to the south were divided through the rural certificates of survey. From this character, it's obvious that the development is more intense within the urban growth area than outside. And one possible explanation for the reason for this development in this area is the easy access to the K10 interchange. North 1000 Road matches up to East 1500. It's a principal arterial being Haskell extended, and it provides direct access to the exchange. The proposed rezoning and land division would be similar to and compatible with the character of the area. Other things we look at is a proposal in conformance with adopted area plans? There are no adopted area plans for this area. Therefore, the long-range plan or the comprehensive plan is the guiding document. We look at, is the property suitable to the uses to which it's restricted with its current zoning? The north 5-acre lot is zoned Ag 2, which does allow residential development. So it is suitable to that. The lot is a non-conforming lot in the Ag 2 district. A minimum 10 acres is required. Therefore, that is a non-conforming lot, and rezoning it to the CP would remove that non-conformity. The southern lot is 20 acres. It's zoned Ag 1 for agriculture. There is a small area of steep slopes that would not be suitable for agriculture, but overall, basically, it's basically suited for agricultural uses. And it's also basically suited for the proposed residential uses. We look at any potential detrimental impacts to the area that would be caused by the rezoning. There should be no impact on the streets in the area. This is Wakarusa Township, and their roads are paved. So there should be no impact on township roads. The water district indicated there were meters available to serve the division. However, they noted that when the platting, if the rezoning is approved and the platting goes forward, they would need to do a feasibility study to see if any improvements were necessary to their system, such as larger pipes. And if it was, this cost would be borne by the developers. So there are no detrimental impacts that have been identified with this rezoning. We look at the impact on environmentally sensitive lands. The only environmentally sensitive lands on the property is a very small area of steep slopes And these could be protected by being kept out of the building envelope. So there should be no impact, no negative impact on that. We look at the suitability for agricultural purposes. And in the staff report, we went through a manual review of the LISA factors just to get a feel for how suitable it is. And basically, we don't use our findings from the LISA yet because we don't have the scoring established. You know, we have to go through that process, but it is a useful tool for us to get a good feel for the productivity or potential productivity of the property. And based on that, the 20-acre parcel appears to be of about average productivity or potential. There are no high quality soils on the site. Those would be class 1 or class 2 soils. There is no prime farmland on the site. But the majority of the property is listed as farmland of statewide importance. And the NRCS notes that this is land that may not be the best for farmland. It may need some work. It may need terracing or soil amendments, but it can be fine farmland. And so the rezoning and subdivision of the 20-acre lot for future residential development would remove this area from agricultural production, and it would remove it from the agricultural inventory. And then finally, we look at the conformance with the comprehensive plan. And so based on the review outlined in the staff report, the proposed rezoning to the CP district is in conformance with the Plan 2040's recommendation regarding protection of environmentally sensitive lands. It's in conformance with the clustered rural residential development, which is specifically recommended in the urban growth area, but it will involve the conversion of agricultural land to residential development. At their May 24th meeting, the Planning Commission voted 6-2 to forward this application to you with a recommendation for denial. And there's quite a bit of discussion at that meeting. And one of the principal concerns was with the agricultural potential of that 20-acre parcel. And so you have several options for you as far as action. You could vote with the Planning Commission to deny the application. You could vote to approve it. That would just take a 2/3 majority, which in your case would be a simple majority, or you could vote the same way to approve it with conditions. And you always have the option to return it to the Planning Commission if you wanted them to reconsider. I did not prepare a resolution for this rezoning since the recommendation was for denial. But if you did vote to approve it, you know, I would ask that you direct me to prepare a resolution and bring that back for adoption. And so that's my presentation today. I'm happy to answer questions if you have any, and I know the applicants are present. I believe they're in the commission room.
Questions? Do we have questions from commissioners?
This is Commissioner Reed. Thanks, Mary, for all of that and all of the documentation that was provided in our agenda packet. I'm curious if can you talk to us a little bit more about private roads? I mean, I heard you talk about how there was an exception made and kind of a discontinued practice now, I suppose. But I'm curious about the fact that this private road is one that doesn't have an outlet and any concerns related to that or regulations specific to the length of road and whether or not the road needs to be lengthened. And I guess I just want to be clear, it is part of the proposal that this would become, if approved, would that road become a public road or would it remain a private road with further exceptions being made?
Mary Miller, planner. Yes, if the rezoning is approved and they plat the property, that road would become a public road. It would no longer be a private road, so it would resolve that issue. And the county engineer has been discussing the road with the applicants. When it was installed as a private road back in the 1990s, there was no length limitation. We have private roads that are quite long. In 2006, the length of a cul-de-sac in the county was set as a 1/4 mile, or it could be a little bit longer if you needed to for topography. And the county engineer indicated that he would like them to extend the road clear to the southern boundary because that would allow for future extensions east and west. That would require a variance from the Planning Commission, but he indicated that he would support the variance and they rely pretty heavily on his recommendation. So that would be something they would have to look into. Otherwise, if the road was shortened, the land division would not be able to occur.
Thanks for clarifying that, Mary, and I appreciate you bringing up the recommendation to extend it to the southern point because that is the edge of the urban growth area, and so that seemed smart to me. So thanks for fleshing that out. I don't have any other questions right now.
Mary, this is Commissioner Kelly. Can you remind us what that future development set aside is for?
Well, with the 2006 subdivision regulations, they just require you to set aside 40%. I believe the intent was so that you could maintain some open space. Previously, when the property was platted, every piece of it was a lot. And now 40% has to stay in open space, which kind of helps maintain that rural character. And I think it also was intended to be a means to protect environmentally sensitive lands if there were any on the property. And if there was a long-range plan, or if a place, it appeared that something might be more suitable for commercial or higher density uses, they could put the future development area there and reserve that for development after it, annexes into the city. The subregs don't spell out the intent, but I believe those would be the intent.
I believe the applicants are here. Would you like to say anything before we have discussion as commissioners?
When you get up there, if you could just push the little green button on the microphone. It's a black button. There you go. Sorry. And then,
Thanks.
If you could give us your name and address for the record, we'd appreciate
Patrick Halpin, 981 East 1549 Road, Lawrence, Kansas, 66046. Good? Okay. So I think if you have all the information that I have that Aaron sent over, this has been kind of a cluster of events that have never come to fruition. So at this point, just very succinctly, we were restricted to 5 acres on our western fence line, which was a dairy farm. We were never a farm per se. The dairy farm was allowed to go down to 3 acres, residential lots. Also, 2 years ago, an event center was allowed to go in on the same farm. So to be held to a restriction of farm, I think is detrimental to our finances. This is what we've looked at as far as retirement and so forth, and have been walking down this road for 20 years to not much happening. So as I understand it, this is our last chance to get this approved to the intent that we started with. It's the whole reason we platted it as a subdivision. That's about all I can say right now. Thank you.
Oh, I think we may have a question.
Sure.
So were you the landowner at the time when the agreement was made with the county?
Yes.
And at that time, it was not rezoned. Is that correct?
Correct.
Why did you not ask for rezoning at that time?
For rezoning for what? We were already we already had permission via the county, if that's the right term, to go ahead and build houses on this. And then with the restriction, okay, well, now you have to plat it as a subdivision. A subdivision meaning this is a place where future housing will be. So I'm not quite understanding the rezoning.
So had it been rezoned to AG1, and Mary, correct me if I'm missing anything, when it would have been automatically converted to cluster preservation, but it wasn't at the time. The agreement was made with the county. It was not rezoned. Is that correct, Mary?
Mary Miller, planner. That's right. If it had been rezoned to A1, it would have automatically converted. And usually A1, the rezoning and the platting go together. You can't plat unless you rezone. So I think the fact that they allowed the platting, the applicant or the property owner didn't see a need to rezone at that time. When the regulations changed, then I think even had it happened before the regulations changed, had they wanted to subdivide at any time since that date, they would have had to rezone.
Mary, so was it at the time, was it typical that when folks had land platted, they also applied for rezoning?
Mary Miller, planner.
I'm trying to figure out why that didn't happen.
Yeah, it was a requirement. And, it was if you wanted to rezone first, or if you wanted to plat, first you had to rezone to A1, or we had R1, but that was just right next to the city limits. So A1 was a zoning, and I was not aware, I don't think anyone was aware when we did the zoning regulations that we had platted land that was not zoned A1. But in order to do any future development or any future land divisions after that date, even if you just waited a few years, you would have had to come forward and rezone.
But this one did get platted without that rezoning.
That's right.
And so you weren't aware, are you telling me you weren't aware that usually when they platted, they rezoned?
No, not at all.
That gets to my question. And you said you wanted to subdivide it for other lots, but at the time in the agreement that I read, it says that you can't subdivide it unless you rezone it. So was your intent always to subdivide it, or is that a new plan?
Our intent per the information we went through with our attorney was that we didn't need to spend the money at that time to go ahead and do the rest of the survey, et cetera, for that purpose, that it could be put off to a later date. That was the only reason we didn't continue forward with this.
And that was from your attorney, not from the planning department that told you that? Okay.
In coordination with the county commissioners at that time is my understanding, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I will open it up for discussion from commissioners. Oh, please come.
My name's Erin Callahan Halpin. My address is 981 East 1549 Road, Lawrence, Kansas 66046. And just a little bit more of information. When we made the settlement agreement in '96, it was our understanding that since the back 20 acres had been set aside as a subdivision, that rezoning was not necessary at that time. And we understood that that was part of how the settlement went down. Mary might know a little bit better about the timing in order to get everything approved and the agreement to not have to rezone at that time. So we were never informed that there was any need otherwise to rezone. And I'm going to try not to belabor this at all. You did receive the email today. And I guess the points that we're trying to make are, we're just trying to retain the past agreement that we've already once had to go through due to errors through administrative and or departmental errors through city and county. We did our due diligence as best as we could. We hired an attorney. We went through the whole process and it settled in our favor. And then I did point out at one point that when we bought the land, we knew that we could have put 7 properties on a maximum of 7 properties on that 35 acres. When we went through the settlement process, we went ahead and while dealing with Dan Watkins said, you know what, Dan, as developers, we understand that if we would build out the property, that we would build a better road. And so we said to Dan, go ahead and let them know that yes, we absolutely intend to build a better road if we build out. It just makes common sense. So in good faith, we said, hey, how about this? If you let us have 4 properties on the private road under the size it's built currently, after we've built a 4th property and prior to building a 5th, we would go ahead and build out the road. And what we've done, which I don't think has been made clear, is as we progress down the property, we have built the road with each stage of development. We've built one at a time. So we've never had, so I just feel like we wanted to make it clear that we've always really tried to work with the county zoning, development, planning. Whenever we've built houses, we've always just sought out everything and anything necessary that we needed to do to make sure that we were going to do things correctly and build an excellent product. And we've always conferred with our building inspectors and anybody that we ever needed to make sure that we would do exactly what was needed to be done. So I just want to point out that Mary's report confirms throughout the whole report that we do meet the criteria for the CP designation, that we are completely surrounded and encased by CP developments, that we're only 2 miles from the K10 bypass, that over 100 parcel owners were sent letters by the county. Absolutely no one made any objection to those letters. We're the only property that we know of that's been refused, and per the Planning Commission's report, the only objection they stated was the environmental impact and/or the agricultural use of the land. The land did have a house, the back 20 acres did have a house on it with the original owners, the Howard family. And I was told it was blown down from a tornado. I believe it was in the 50s or so, but you can still see where the yard was. There's lilies and irises and other things that grow where the original house was. The owners, I noted in this letter today that Mr. Howard had indicated to us when we were purchasing the property. I asked, have you ever crop farmed this? Have you ever farmed it? Have you ever produced anything on it? And he said they tried and they could never make it a viable property due to the very poor clay soil content, the glacial till. It's so rocky that whenever they would disc up, they just came up with just tons and tons of glacial till, and they were unable to ever make a profit or any productivity out of that land. And for us, there was a mention by the Planning Commission that this land could easily be reworked so that it could be productive. And I contacted several contractors, the Baldwin Elevator, to find out, they have fertilized our property in the past and seeded it. And between having the property cleared, just having the property cleared in order to prep it for spraying of weeds, fertilizing, seeding, all that would include to start to bring it up just to an even average amount of brome and or fescue would cost tens of thousands of dollars. And it's only 20 acres. No one would be able to farm that 20 acres and come anywhere close to making any profit. They would purely always be at a loss. So we felt at that time, due to that, coming from farmland up in Iowa, that this property was not a farm that we were going to take away from Kansas land. We felt that it was actually more suited, and we've waited to build on it until we felt like it was the right time to build more houses out there. We didn't want to rush it. We didn't want to change the character of the land anytime ahead. We currently don't have any immediate plans to develop it. We're just trying to come in compliance and keep up with the zoning and regulations and changes that came to our attention. Per the notes on the soils, I just would like to ask that you have noted that The soils, class 3, have severe limitations that reduce the choice of plants or require special conservation practices, or both. Class 4 soils have very severe limitations that restrict the choice of plants or require very careful management, or both. And those are the 2 soils that are on our property. Mary noted that there's very minimal amount of steep slope, and we are very environmentally conscious. That's why we never wanted to go down below 5 acres on a property. And we would definitely protect any environmental impact that we could possibly protect. When we build, we never tear down a tree. I'm on the excavator's back when they're excavating, making sure that not one tree goes touched that doesn't need to be moved, that the land isn't disturbed any more than it absolutely has to. I'm sorry, So it's also noted that even though the land is not platted and its division was never subject to public hearing, well, it is platted. We platted it in '96 as a subdivision, and Mary made note, and I've written it in here somewhere, that the special circumstances of the plat clarifies that ag land does not need to be platted. Subdivision land does need to be platted, and that is why Dan Watkins insisted that we needed to plat the property at that time and set it down as a subdivision for development. There's also a note that 54 contiguous parcels immediately adjacent to the west were automatically rezoned in 2020 from ag to CP. There's development currently going on even past 1500 Road to the west, where they're building houses that are actually located on much better farmland than the topography of ours. There are several new developments within a half a mile to the east of us that are CPs. The whole area to the north of us, west of us, east of us is pretty heavily developed all the way up to the city of Lawrence. And even in the south, within a half mile of us, there's recently been quite a few new acreage lots that are being built on.
Thank you. We really appreciate the additional information.
Okay.
And we'll let you know if we have any questions as we discuss.
And just one more comment, please. So we have discussed and researched this with due diligence, and we've discussed it with my son-in-law, Marshall McGinnis, who is the attorney for the Americas for Hill Palmolive, and he has done a lot of extensive work with the County Commission and the Planning Commission last year for property that he bought, so he's well versed in it. My daughter is a JD and a legal compliance director for Advisors Excel in Topeka, and my son is also a professional in construction, and none of us can understand any reason why the planning department denied our request, especially giving all the circumstances and Mary's report supporting it. So, thank you.
We'll bring it back for discussion amongst commissioners.
Commissioners,
Go ahead.
if I could, I did ask, and I've had some conversation with our zoning director, Tanya Voigt, and Mary can confirm if this is true or not. This is a very unusual circumstance where a property has been platted but not rezoned. I wish I could go back in time to 1996 to fully understand why it was not rezoned. I mean, I think it probably was to save money at the time to not go through the rezoning. But from the best of our knowledge right now, this is the only property in Douglas County that is platted and not zoned appropriately. So
Sarah,
I just think that's an important piece of information for you all to have.
I think it's a super important piece of information for us to have. And I also wish we had a time machine to go back to 1996 and figure out exactly what was going on there. Because it wasn't rezoned, has that affected how property taxes have been collected on the property between 1996 and now in any way?
No.
Okay,
Zoning
that was,
it's all about what's developed on the land at the time.
I thought so. I just wanted to make sure. This doesn't seem like it's actually protecting agricultural land too.
We don't really take questions.
I'm sorry. I thought Mary's report stated that in addition to our property, the other 3 properties that were involved in the settlement in 96 also weren't rezoned appropriately in 2020. Is that right, Mary?
Mary Miller, planner. I'm not sure which properties you're referring to. Are you referring to the other lots to the north? There could have been others that happened in 96. I mean, we only come across them when we run across them. I didn't find any mention of them, and I don't know if Tanya's found any. So other than this subdivision, I'm not sure there is another in the county. Is that what you mean? You think there is another?
I'm referring to the other 3 properties in the settlement agreement represented by Dan Watkins in 1996 that also had the private roads. I thought there was something in your report that said that those properties also weren't converted to CP in 2020.
Mary Miller, planner. I don't even call that specifically. I do think there was some mention of there perhaps were other properties that were involved in the settlement agreement, but they didn't list them. And I don't know, we could do some history and see if there were, they did not convert their zoning. So this could come up again if these other properties ever wanted to develop. But
so Mary, I think that would be an important thing for us to determine, you know, if we have other, and I know Tanya's trying to look at GIS right now, and maybe we need a little bit more time to verify those kinds of things, but I think it would just be important for consistency that we understand what it is that if there are other platted properties that are not zoned appropriately, so we can be a little bit more proactive about that. Tanya, do you have?
Yeah, Tanya Voigt, zoning director. So I just did a quick scouring just of the entire county of all the plaques on. And when you look at a platted lot, you can also turn on the county zoning to see what it's zoned. And so when you overlay that, you can see that every single platted lot has CP zoning. I'm not showing any others in the county. I don't know anything about the settlement agreement. I don't know where those properties are. That would be super helpful. But just doing a quick scour with the plat on and the zoning, I do not show any others.
Does this property show up though, when you do that platting zoning overlay? So this shows up as the one outlier.
Got it. That's right.
Okay. Thank you.
Mary Miller, I just want to mention, it's possible there were others and perhaps they rezoned or developed in another way since then.
Mary, this is Commissioner Kelly. I just have a couple of follow-ups on something that the applicant said. They said the back 20 acres was set aside as a subdivision. Would you agree with that? That when the agreement was made, it was set aside as a subdivision?
I know that it was included in the subdivision. The subdivision had 4 lots and one was 20 acres. It might have been their intent to set it aside, and that would be the one lot that could be developed further. And I know on the plat, there is a note that says if there's any lot splits or future subdivision, you have to dedicate the right of way. So from that, I assume they thought future subdivisions might occur, but I don't think the 20 acres was specifically set aside.
Right. Okay. And then the other statement I heard is it's completely surrounded by CP development. Tanya, you've got that zoning map up. I was looking at it this afternoon. I don't think it is completely surrounded by CP development, but I may have read the map wrong.
Mary Miller. Let me see if I can go back and pull up that map. I know there's CP to the west.
Yeah.
And then there is CP to the east. It jumps. There's a forested parcel to the east. It jumps that. And I don't think there's much else. There's development in the area. Let me just go back and find my presentation.
Would you like me to share screen real quick so you guys can see that? Oh, Mary's got it. Thank you.
Sorry. Find that map. Lost it.
Excuse me, Patrick, I didn't mean completely, I meant extensively.
We have CP to the west, and then across this lot, we have, or parcel, we have CP. But there's no CP to the north and south. So it's not surrounded, but it is in close proximity too.
Thank you. I wanted to confirm, I wanted to make sure I was thinking about it correctly.
This is Commissioner Reed. So for me, it feels like there's such uniqueness to this and sort of enough mitigating circumstances and some acknowledged uncertainty about what exactly occurred that was either a failure to communicate or miscommunication, perhaps something that was different in that process 20 plus years ago, it feels like an exceptional case. It doesn't feel like it's prime agricultural land worth preserving in its entirety without, other than that 40% set aside that's built in. And I mean, when I watched the Planning Commission meeting and discussion about it, before I had referenced the maps and looked at the paperwork, I knew exactly where it was at, and that I immediately thought of how heavily developed it is around there. And so to me, the fact that it fits inside the character of the area is a pretty compelling piece of it for me. And also that the acknowledged environmentally sensitive lands can be protected and preserved, and that 40% set aside feels like a good condition.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of factors here. One is this settlement agreement and sort of what happened on that. And that's why I was just asking questions to see if we could get maybe into between the words and the spaces of what actually happened there. So I appreciate, you know, you giving the history, Patrick, of what you remember happening at the time. And it doesn't sound like the planning department either, the joint planning department or the county planning department has any more to illuminate on why this happened. And that does seem to make it unique. I sort of think in looking at that and then looking at the agreement, there's no winner or loser there. It's just confusing. And so then I transfer to the golden factor. So I just look at it as a zoning issue. I thought the Planning Commission did a really good job of elevating the conflict in our comprehensive plan between trying to preserve the rural nature, the agricultural farmland, and the part that I think we've maybe missed a little bit is to accommodate uses, other uses whenever possible. That is in the comprehensive plan, and we're sort of leaning heavily. Sarah, did you have something to say?
Can you move a little closer to the mic?
I can move a little closer to the mic, yes.
That's all.
There's that two parts of the comprehensive plan, and I appreciate that our planning commissioners have really glommed onto that part about preserving rural. However, I'm in agreement with, sounds like both commissioners, that this property, and I went and drove by it, is fairly developed in that area. I think, you know, you could make an argument that, and there was some argument at the Planning Commission about how it's grazable land and is that land that we want to preserve. I think we can sometimes be overzealous, but I also remember others telling me, like, once it's gone, it's gone. I think the other thing we have to think about is I am concerned about residential development on 20-acre lots, because I think that's what's going to happen on this lot if we don't approve that. And I worry a little bit about those homeowners being able to maintain a 20-acre lot that they're not going to farm. So I think the big impact on this, if we approve, well, if we don't follow the Planning Commission's directive, is that it will make it hard when the city grows out to that point, because we've got 5-acre lots. However, the joint city planning department is telling us they're okay with that. So I guess I don't love this, but I understand the conflicting values and that this is a unique property. I don't usually like going against the Planning Commission, but in this case, I think I would.
I think that all makes sense. And I do think that the future development piece of when the city catches up with all of that space is going to be really complicated. And I think it's already complicated by other CP areas around this particular lot. It does sound like, Mary, we may need you to draft a resolution for us.
Commissioners, if there is thoughts about drafting a resolution of support, should there be conversation about the private road? And Mary, I don't have what you all had in the packet in terms of when there was a staff recommendation for support, what the condition was for the private road. And I guess just, does the commission want to weigh in on that if we're asking Mary to go back and?
My understanding was that with this, the private road would be converted with right-of-ways.
I think the recommendation from the county engineer was for some improvements to be made before that became a public road. But Mary, you can correct us if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, Mary Miller, planner. We talked to the county engineer early on because if that road couldn't be that length, then there was no sense in rezoning. And so his comments would relate primarily to the plat, and it would be that that right of way has to be dedicated and the road has to be built. And he recommended that they go all the way to the southern property line, but that's not really a condition of the rezoning. But we wanted that information ahead of time, so we know that that's what has to happen with the plat. And the preliminary plat, oh, I'm sorry, you'll just see a minor subdivision, but it will come back before you for the dedication of that right of way for that public road. You can always include it in your motion, you know, that that's going to become a public road. It is a note on the plat, so it's.
Tanya Voigt, zoning director. So just to make it clear, our office cannot issue any more building permits on a private road. That was approved originally for 3 residential building permits on a private road. Then that went through a settlement agreement. The 4th was approved. And then I think that had something to do with requiring platting for them to approve the 4th residence. And so I think that's where the county commission said you need to plat because you want the 4th residence, because all private roads were approved for 3 residences, but somehow through that settlement agreement, they got another. So we would not be able to issue any building permits on that private road without them dedicating a public road.
So just for clarification, part of the whole issue we went through with their attorney, Dan Watkins, that part and parcel with that was that, yes, we could put up to a 4th residence on the private road. After that 4th residence, then it would have to go to a public right-of-way, correct? But again, that 4th one was there. And to your point as well, and to Aaron's point, we're not looking for a building permit right now. We're just trying to get clarification on this whole thing so that down the road, we don't have to go over these hurdles again.
And I guess I just want us to clarify that piece on the road and just ask Mary to consult back with the county engineer on that piece as we go back, and if we're going to pass a resolution for approval. You know, this is not built to county standards as it currently is, and the township's going to have to maintain it if it becomes a public road. And I don't want to put them in a position where they're having, if there are going to be more homes added, that they don't have a road that can maintain. So, and I think we could work that out in conversations with the county engineer. And if it's not contingent on the rezoning, I guess I just want to make sure that we're just not missing that piece. And so maybe if it's just the rezoning and it stays at the 4, it wouldn't happen. But if there was a desire to change after that, then it would have to be built to county standards so that the township could maintain it.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. I just didn't want to lose track of that piece.
We wouldn't want, I mean, it would be so inadequate. We wouldn't want to sell lots with an inadequate road that would diminish the quality of our development. And I mean, we're trying to develop a very nice high-end property.
We
like
can't hear you, and we
sorry.
generally don't go back and forth.
I think that the real question is a zoning question. It sounds like we're set on that piece of it.
I think we are set on the zoning piece, and we can just, you know, we've clarified our intent here on public-private road, and just so that everyone's transparent about that issue. So, and Mary, do you need anything else from the commission at this point in time to draft a resolution and bring that back to the commission?
Mary Miller, planner. No, I can get that drafted and I'll get it back on your agenda.
What is your timing for that?
It'll just take a few days to prepare, but I have to get it to Robin. So next Wednesday. So it would be 2 weeks from now to give us time to get it prepared and get it on your agenda. So 2 weeks would be July the
14th.
14th.
I know we have a text amendment coming back
that same day.
Yeah, I was just wanting to make us be thoughtful about that. This is a unique situation, so I think the text amendment, I want to make sure we get this one done. This one done before that.
So it would likely be done at the same meeting as we're proposing it right now.
Okay.
And honestly, I think that's about as fast as we can make it happen. So
and just help me understand. So we need a separate resolution because we're doing something that's different than the recommendation from the Planning Commission.
When you deny, you don't need to do anything. But if you're going to make a motion to approve, there's generally a resolution associated with that.
Great.
So I don't know if we need a motion to specifically direct staff to, I think that would be good, to a motion to direct staff to prepare a resolution for approval and bring it back before the County Commission.
I move to direct staff to prepare a resolution for approval and bring it back to the County Commission.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We will move on to appointments. Do we have any appointments to consider this evening? Okay, we will move on to miscellaneous. Sarah, what do you have for us?
Yeah, commissioners, I do have a pretty full weekly memo for you in the packet. The first one I want to pull your attention to is an updated information from Brooke Sauer related to the American Rescue Plan update. So I won't read it, but I do think we're beginning to get some really good information there. There's also a memo in the packet, a letter from the mayor of Baldwin City in support of a 5-member commission, and is in there as well. So just want to make sure, pull your attention to those 2 items. And that's all I have.
Do we have any additional miscellaneous items from commissioners?
None from me.
I'm good.
All right, and we are adjourned for the evening.